Hello and welcome to the first ever Belongly webinar. We're so excited to have you with us. We've had a lot of conversations with the community about the challenges in growing your practice. We have solo practitioners who want to expand. We have folks who are currently part of a practice and thinking about going out on their own. We also have members who are running thriving businesses and exploring how to take them to the next level. So there are a lot of resources out there that help clinicians who are just starting out. Belongly has produced some great ones. We have a resource map of essential services, email templates, all of which we'll link in the notes. But today we'd like to focus on the bigger picture and what is possible if you really allow yourself to think creatively about who you are and what your practice could be. We're honored to have two of our Belongly members, Sara Makin and Marcus Rodriguez, who have done just that. Both have incredible dynamic careers and continue to grow and iterate on that success. So before I pass it off to Sara and Marcus, I'll give you just a bit of background on them. Since establishing Makin Wellness in 2017, Sara has led her company to its position today as Pennsylvania's fastest growing privately owned telemental health company. Sara's been featured in major media outlets, including NBC, ABC, Fox, the CW, International Business Times, and the Scientific Journal. She was named a top 100 healthcare leader in 2019 and an empowering woman in philanthropy in 2018. A three-time best-selling author, Sara is fueled by a relentless desire to improve virtual mental health outcomes and provide the masses with outstanding mental health care. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez is the founder and director of the Youth and Family Institute in Los Angeles, an evidence-based mental health treatment, training, and research clinic. He's also the director of the Global Mental Health Research Lab and assistant professor of psychology at Pitzer College. Marcus was born in California, grew up in Mexico, studied in Germany, lived in China for 9 years after college, and has traveled to more than 80 countries. He provides direct patient care, consultation, supervision, and training in English, Spanish, and Mandarin, and has helped train thousands of mental health professionals throughout the US, China, and Latin America. Dr. Rodriguez is a founding member of ISIT DBT's Anti-Racism Committee. He published a book on DBT in Mandarin, co-authored dozens of articles in peer-reviewed journals, and made more than 100 clinical and scholarly conference presentations. He enjoys travel hacking, making memes, and writing children's books. So with that, I'll pass it over to Marcus and Sara.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lindsay. I think this is also really timely. I'm excited to have some time to talk to you, Sara, as I recently opened Youth and Family Institute just this summer. So learning about your journey will both benefit me and, of course, hopefully benefit other members of the Belongly community. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'd love to just hear, starting out, like, how did you decide to open your own practice, your own clinic? What was that like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And essentially what was happening and what I noticed was that there was a lack of innovation in the mental health sector. And I had a desire to go into this industry and to help as many people to heal and become happy again. And so regarding when the time was right to get started, I ended up starting Makin Wellness in 2017. And it was just, I just felt like it was time for me to get the company started. It was also around the time of getting my first book deal put together. And so I knew that that was going to bring more visibility to the company. And I felt like I had not necessarily all, the clinical expertise at that point in time. But what I did have was different ideas and different strategies that I was learning about throughout the years to get the company started. And I knew that I could continue getting supervision clinically until I was licensed. So it was a combination of different things. Yeah.
You had started your company before you were fully licensed then?
Yeah. So in Pennsylvania, it was actually legal to do so up until a few years ago, actually. So yeah, now it's illegal. Um, so I'm like, thank goodness,
Wow, that's ambitious of you.
yeah, yeah. But the whole like my whole reason behind going to school and getting my master's was to start making wellness. So I had my eye on the prize and knew for a long time this is what I wanted. So I had a lot of time to prepare beforehand too. So
Mm. So what you had envisioned, was that something that was like modeled for you? Did you ever get to like work under someone who was doing what you later envisioned or are currently doing?
that's a really great question. I actually did not, from the clinical perspective and from the work perspective. All my experience was really like co-occurring mental health and addiction treatment, mostly with motivational interviewing and some cognitive behavioral therapy. So I didn't get to learn like directly from um, other providers that had their own companies. Um, and so that was a little bit different. So I had business mentors, and I still do to this day, that I consult with and get different ideas and feedback from. Um, so that
Wow.
is cool. Yeah.
So I imagine you had to have, like you said, like clinical supervisors and clinical mentors, and then you like explicitly sought out business mentors along the way.
Yeah.
Um, I guess that makes me think about another thing. It sounds like you knew at a like I don't know, like at a very young age, or whether or not, or you knew a long time ago that you were going to do a clinic and that you wanted to own your own business. How, what about other people who aren't as clear and sure? Like who, I guess almost like taking a step back, like who is, in your opinion, who is this for and who is it not for?
Yeah. That's a
How
really
did you know that like this was like for you? And I don't know, like it might not be for everyone. So how do you see that?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that's something that everyone really needs to consider. Um, I knew this was for me because this is my dream and my vision that I've always had for my career. And so, and I have zero issues or complaints regarding putting in the time, learning, working, doing things differently. And I think remaining teachable is extremely important, and coachable from the right people and from the right sources, of course. And so the reality is that it does take a lot of time. Um, you're not going to be working, depending on the size and scope. Um, there's going to be times when you are working extended hours, or times when you have to get involved operationally if certain challenges are happening and different things like that. And so I think if someone has a big motivation and a big why to why they want to have their own clinic, um, and that you don't mind putting in the time, and that you don't mind being coachable, and that you have certain skill sets that are important to have a successful clinic or to have a successful business. Um, there is a level, we were just talking about like analytics, like you have to have certain types of have to put in time to learn about certain things. For instance, having an understanding of, like, if you are accepting insurance, having an understanding of how those agreements are, having an understanding of how those contracts are, understanding what your state's regulations are, bookkeeping, accounting, marketing. There's so many different things that are all very important, that go directly into success. And so if learning about these different things is not appealing, and if you just want to practice independently on your own, I really don't think that's enough, um, because I've seen so many people start their own private practice and like wanting to do it on the side, and then realizing, oh my gosh, like why am I paying so much at the end of the year in taxes, or, you know, different things happen or come up that is outside the clinical realm. I've noticed sometimes people like might not know what to do, or might not realize that, oh, I have to do other things too, like potentially shovel snow if like you live in a cold climate and you've seen clients in person. You know, if you don't find someone to shovel the snow, then it's going to have to be you. You know, um, so it's really having a big why, and then having, if you don't have the skill set now, being willing to at least learn, and being understanding and realistic that things take time to build, especially in the startup and the beginning stages, and to be persistent um, is really important as well. Even if you don't see any results, like in the beginning, like I was doing and creating search engine optimized blogs, and I was posting once per week. And my mom honestly thought I was starting to lose it, because she's like, you spend hours posting on the website, posting on these blogs, you know, doing social media, doing all these things, and you only have like 2 clients that you're saying. I said, Mom, this is what it is right now, but down the road, it's going to be different. I promise, you know? So staying persistent whenever you do start to take some of these steps, because it does, you know, does take time. There's no true thing is like a true overnight success. It takes years to get to that point.
I imagine that's really tricky too. I remember there was a quote that I read. It said like, courage is knowing that it might hurt and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Stupidity is the same. And that's
Yeah.
why life is hard. It's like a Jeremy Goldberg. So on the one hand, you're like, you got to be persistent even when you don't see results. And it's like, that's courage. But that's also stupidity. Like it's so tricky, right? To know, is the thing that I'm doing producing results? Um, I'm excited because I see like, sorry.
That relates to strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And
Good.
coaching, right? Getting good
Yeah.
coaching.
Yeah, definitely. And the
Yeah.
strategy is an A+ strategy. Then execution needs to be A+ as well to deliver the best result.
Mm.
And if you know that the strategy is going to lead to success, then it's implementation of that. It's like a treatment plan. You put together, I'm sure yourself and everyone listening has spent lots of time putting together treatment plans. You can create the most fabulous evidence-based treatment plan in the world, but if the client doesn't implement it, if they're not taking their medication as prescribed, if they're not showing up to session on time, if they're not, you know, challenging irrational thoughts and different things, like they're not going to get better. And it's similar to having your clinic. Like you have this brilliant strategy, but the execution of the strategy needs to also be on point. It's very important.
Mm. Okay, now I have like a bunch of questions, but I actually want to think about this almost like in stages, because what you've built is a really large clinic in a short amount of time. And some people might envision that for themselves, but I imagine there's also a lot of people that are just thinking about working solo practice, right? They're currently working for someone else and they're considering, do I want to work solo? And a lot of what you said, I imagine still applies. Like you've got to have certain skill sets or willingness to develop the skill set. You've got to be willing to work hard, right? To like to shovel snow, put in extra hours and learn things that are, I don't know, outside of the scope of what you explicitly got your training for. I guess in terms of like, what are, in your best estimation, the skill sets needed for someone who wants to just go into solo practice, like wants to not work for someone else? What are those skill sets that they need to either already possess, or are there any that they must possess in advance and they can't really learn along the way? And what are the skill sets that they eventually would need to learn to be able to manage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the first is just basic um, therapeutic skills mastered is
Yeah.
ideal. So having a high retention rate, reducing not having a low churn rate, and having exceptional outcomes with your clients is a priority. And the second thing I would say is really marketing and getting the word out. is a skill that's important to have beforehand, because if you have an understanding of who your ideal client is, where they are, how to target them, um, all of those things really help so you can essentially fill up your caseload as fast as possible. Um, it is possible to go into it without that. I did personally, and that is one of my biggest regrets is if I spent more time on the marketing beforehand, we would be in a totally different situation today, but that's okay because obviously you live and you learn.
Yeah.
But marketing skills are incredibly important. And I know for therapists, sometimes, there's the discomfort there or them feeling not good about like promoting themselves. And I think it's important to remind yourself that you sharing your message of what you do, what the clinic does, allows you to help more people and look at it as I'm speaking out or I'm sharing on to basically help more people. And it does become easier whenever you do start to hire clinicians, because like for myself, I love showing off our team and talking about their amazing accomplishments and different things that they do. Promoting myself, I don't really care too much to do that. And so that's another thing to consider
Mm.
with the marketing part.
What are like, I guess I'd be curious, like what are effective, maybe like 2 or 3 tips for people, like practical things that people can do to market themselves if they're in solo practice? Like, what does that look like behaviorally?
Yeah. So 2 or 3 things that can really help. First thing is notifying your network of what you're doing so they are aware, and specifically telling them, I'm welcoming new referrals or I'm accepting new clients, or however you want to word it. The second thing is having a beautiful business card created and having business cards in your wallet, in your purse, in your car, and with you. So that way, because obviously we never know who we're going to meet or where we're, you know, how sharing that can help. And so I always have those with me and I always share those with people. And then at Starbucks, like sometimes whenever I go to a restaurant, I'll leave my business card in there. After I pay, like I'm constantly leaving my business card out at places as well.
Like
Yeah.
you leave it on the counter or like you put it like what do you mean? You just like leave it on the table?
Yeah, I'll like leave it on the table or I'll put it in the little thing. Like I've any excuse. I've actually read a book once called Endless Referrals.
Yeah.
And that strategy is from that book.
Oh.
The author actually said that this is back then, this book is a little bit older. Every time he paid a bill, he would put his business card in it too. So the person that accepted the bill and processed it would, you know, see that. And you can't unsee it once you see it. So
Starbucks, and you like hear a couple like arguing, you can just like drop it off at the corner. Like
just
here,
push it
you
over.
might need professional help.
Yeah. Well, Starbucks is a great place too, because they have boards and
Yeah.
I always pin my stuff, even if you're not supposed to, I do it anyways, because yeah, it's helping people, you know?
Yeah. No, this is
So,
brilliant. I think a lot of people, you're right. I think a lot of people would feel really uncomfortable, like even me hearing it, and I'm like, wow, that's intense, and also like probably really, really brilliant, as well. Any other like marketing? I don't know, like how does a solo practitioner market themselves? I actually really love that you mentioned business cards because again, I just started my clinic a few months ago, and I thought like business cards were a thing of the past, so I didn't make any. And then I went to like this conference networking thing in July, and people kept asking for my business card. I was like, is this the 1990s? Like, I don't know. I thought like between COVID and all of our technology, but yeah, people do want business cards, and some people have really fancy ones that are like 3D, and
oh yeah, the
like they're like,
fancy, yeah, that's a down the road investment. the reason why the fancy ones, I mean, it's a branding thing. If your brand is luxury and upscale, private pay, if you're Newport Beach or, other affluent areas, then absolutely make the investment in a very bougie, fancy business card. But again, it's a branding thing. And, there's electronic business cards too. The challenge with the electronic business card is you can't like accidentally leave it out anywhere. You can't like pin an electronic business card
You
to
could
like,
get like a stamp version, like the ink and just like put a QR code on the like Starbucks table. I'm sure they'd love you.
oh yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Like taking notes.
um, awesome. I guess who is this not for? Who is and I don't mean like group practice. I mean solo practice. So we talked about like what would be needed and what would, and I guess it might be the opposite of what you said is needed, but is there anything that's kind of like rule out criteria where you'd be like, this is not for you? Apart from, you mentioned like they have to be willing to put in longer hours, they have to be, I don't know, I guess like willing to learn a variety of skills and to do many different things that fall outside of the clinical training they received. Are there any rule outs that you're like, this is probably not for you or not at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're quite disorganized, if you're not good with money,
Now you're just talking about me, right?
I'm just calling you out, Marcus.
I know, right?
No, but seriously, if you can't manage your own finances already, you're gonna, I don't want to say fail, but the probability of effectively managing even more revenue and finances for a business is, you know, the success is probably not going to happen there. If
Unless, if I could add, unless you have a really great partner. So I opened my clinic with my wife and she does
Yeah.
like all that stuff. Like
Oh
I
yeah,
like,
awesome.
yeah, like I do like clinical and she actually runs
The
the
business
business.
stuff. That's awesome. So if that's the case, if you have a
There's still hope. Yeah, there's still hope for people like me.
oh my gosh, well, I was assuming that we're just talking about clinicians by themselves. So if you have a partner who has these skill sets, then that is ideal for sure. If it's not you, then it needs to be someone else for sure. So disorganized, the money part, and if you are in a situation where steady cash flow is very important, like if you don't have savings or access to loans, I would also say don't do that because it can be risky. There's no guarantee that any business is going to be successful. Um, and if you just really love to see clients and um, are not able to put in like the emotional commitment or like the time commitment into getting the situation up and running, I would say that it probably wouldn't be ideal at that point.
Mm. I guess similar question about like, what about like something larger, right? Because solo practice is probably different. What about like who is who is a group practice or like a group, like a larger clinic for and not for in your as from what you've seen?
Yeah. So the larger, if someone is interested in a larger clinic, I would say that it is for someone who has a vision, has a larger vision for the impact that they can make, and has started to put together a high performing team that everyone's on the same page and everyone has the same vision. And you have access, you have good credit, you have access to capital, you have steady cash flow, you have a consistent flow of patients, and a system that's working to consistently attract and retain patients. I would say at that point, it, at that point, it is easier to grow off of something that is already working well. And who it isn't for, if you don't enjoy managing employees or therapists, if you have trouble with boundaries, if you have poor communication skills, if You don't have systems or standard operating procedures in place. And if you just don't, really have the interest in growing it, there's really no need to. I mean, being a solo practice owner, the margins for the most part are the best they're ever going to be. They go down as you grow. So if just money is the motivation, then that is a very long-term game that you'll be playing to increase your salary. So it's another thing to consider.
Mm. I wonder, I guess I also want to like break down some of the like ask you more so like having a steady flow of patients was one of the things that you mentioned is necessary. What are some of the and I imagine that really varies, like you said before, between insurance-based clinics, fee for service, like cash clinics. But in these different models, what have you seen to be effective sources? And I guess maybe, yeah, effective sources of patient flow.
There's a lot of things. Having relationships with referral sources, which can be hospitals, clinics, rehabs, IOPs, group doctors' offices, doctors, lawyers, different. I mean, even like nutritionists, if they, for instance, see a lot of eating disorder clients. It really depends on your specialty and what type of specialties are in-house. So like, for instance, if someone did a lot of therapy for kids, like building relationships with schools and potentially different churches that have like the programs for the kids. I forget what they're called, like
Sunday school or Bible school.
Or if like someone does like faith-based counseling, like developing relationships with churches. So it really depends on where your ideal clients, when I say ideal clients, I mean specifically where your clients are at currently that need your services, and developing relationships with those organizations or those people. And the one mistake that I made in the beginning, Marcus, which is going to save you so much time and money and energy, I developed and I wasted so much of my time on a one-to-one strategy when it came to referral relationships. I targeted small places, and it's 10 times better and easier if you target larger places that have more volume. Therefore, it immediately increases the amount of referrals you get. It's 10 times easier. 10 times easier.
Yeah.
So go for, it's like universities, hospitals, clinics that don't have an outpatient level of care, or if they do have an outpatient level of care, they are so full with such a long wait list that they have to refer out. So that way it's not like a competitive, thing.
That's good advice. That's good advice. And what you also mentioned, like for someone who's going to build a big clinic, like cash flow is needed. Why? Like, why is that needed?
Oh my gosh,
That might be such like a rookie question. You're probably like, oh shit, Marcus, like you're screwed if you don't
so
answer
good.
that.
I'm just salivating because I love talking about this stuff. So the reason why cash flow is so important, it's because it is the lifeline of your clinic. It is, if we think about the hierarchy of needs, cash flow is the first, and it is the most important before you can do anything else, because you can't pay your EHR, you can't pay for your rent, you can't pay for X, Y, and Z, you can't deliver excellent client care or excellent care to the patients. So getting the business set up in a way where you have healthy cash flow is very important. Most medical companies have, that accept insurance can have challenges with cash flow. Like our, like most of our patients are commercial insurance patients. So we don't get paid the day after we submit a claim. We get paid about, for us, it's like about 45 days after a claim is submitted. There are some insurance companies that, there's one in particular, the average return is 8 months.
Name them. Who is it?
I am not going to drop, I'm not going to spill that tea.
You're not going to shame them publicly here?
I will not publicly shame them. But if I was petty, I would, but I'm not.
Okay.
So I might be petty tomorrow, but
maybe you could like text me after.
I'll text you so you are aware. So you and your wife are not surprised when 8 months later you're still not paid. So given that, you know, you need to ensure that you have cash flow, so that healthy cash flow, so that you can still pay yourself, pay your expenses, and then down the road eventually pay for your employees and for other things. And so the medical billing and the billing system and process is really important for it to be a top priority when you are first getting started, and to constantly tweak it to improve it. Ensure you're sending out electronic and paper statements, getting credit cards on file, collecting copays at the time of the session. Did you know that if you don't collect a copay at the time of the session, every day that goes by, the probability of you collecting that copay goes down significantly? You need to collect the copay the day of the session. It's very important. Using a system to help to collect on outstanding copays and balances is also really important. Whatever can be automated is better. And keep in mind that patients open their text messages more than they open their emails. So is it possible to send electronic statements directly to someone's text messages instead of just their emails? And if so, do that.
It's so good. Yeah, my practice manager just stopped emailing me. She just texts me now. She realized, like, if I need a response from Marcus, it's got to be a text. You know, one thought I have about the cash flow thing. I recently listened to on Audible. I listened to a book. It was called Quitter by John Acuff, or I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Acuff, but it was about like starting a business and doing what you love. And he had, his first chapter was don't quit, and I thought it was great. And for similar reasons, he was saying, like, while you're building something, if you rely on it too soon, you need it to be paying you back right away. And a lot of times we'll end up taking jobs or doing things out of necessity that aren't actually in line with our values or our long-term goals for the company, but because we need it to be able to like give back to us right away. But if we have a separate job and we can hustle on the side, again, I guess that still comes back to what you said. It's like you have to be willing to work hard though, like regardless, because that means you're like, you have a steady source of cash flow with a secure job, and then you're building this until it's ready to sustain you. But I guess that's another model that might work, maybe more for people in solo practice than in group practices. Yeah. I wonder too, you mentioned that another like thing that's needed for building a group practice is knowing how to manage people and how to build a team. And I think I'd be curious, even beyond like managing people, because we can, I guess there's books on management about that. I'm really curious from a mental health perspective, and in this particular industry, how do you build a culture so that some of the culture and the system is like I guess it removes the necessity for lots of management. I guess how do you build a culture that helps support your employees and yeah, I guess supports your efforts to manage them, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so that's a really phenomenal question, Marcus. So culture is essentially a reflection of the company's values and what they most value, essentially. So number one is having a clear mission, having clear values, documenting them, making sure that they're out, making sure that the team is fully aware, and having that communication to be incorporated into your day-to-day operations and with how you communicate with your team. So for us, we're a values-driven company. Our number one value is excellent client care. And so that is incorporated into all of our systems and our processes. That our systems all are really wired and rigged to deliver excellent client care. And the team is fully aware that that is the number one priority. And so when it comes to developing a culture, it's really considering, okay, what is the mission? What is the vision? What are the values? And how does this impact the culture? And if the mission, vision, or values are not a reflection of what you want for the culture, then you need to adjust them so that they are reflective of the culture that you want to create. And ultimately, culture starts with the top down. It is not the therapist's or your admin's responsibility to deliver and to act in a to help to create the culture. It really starts with the owner or whomever is at the top of an organization. So it starts with you being the example of what you want the team to be, and not just saying that this is what it is, like actually truly living it out, because your team sees, you know, what you do and how you act and how you behave, and they're going to mimic and model that. So it starts with you, and it's easier to manage culture in the early stages. And also keep in mind that the first 10 employees that you have are really going to shape the culture for the company down the road and create the model for the culture. So if you were noticing that you have people, you know, in your clinic, or if that hasn't happened now, just be aware to be very selective with who you bring on in the early stages, because they set the tone for what it's going to look like. And if you don't like what the tone is, you know, having a conversation, you know, with the team and talking about what, you know, yourself and the team specifically is looking for in a culture, and then like, what can we do to ensure that this is congruent with our mission, vision, and our values, and getting that set up. And there's lots of different things that you can do to develop a strong culture. Like for instance, like we have like a team appreciation day every single year, where it's like in person, and we throw a big party and we celebrate and support our team. We have like different like virtual happy hours that we do. Like we have a book club. So every single month our team selects what book they want to read and we order it for them. And so everyone's different, every culture is different. And so it's really like, what do you want to have? And a company that really did an exceptional job with strong culture is Zappos. And there's actually a book about, and you can go to Google to search it, but if you go to Google and search like Zappos culture book, they actually have like a visual book that shows like what they want their culture to be. So that's another thing too that you could develop with your team or develop beforehand.
The Zappos experience, maybe. I don't know.
I think that might be it. There's
Joseph
two.
Shelley.
Oh yeah. There's one that is an actual, every year they create like a Zappos book that highlights their culture, and then there's a book that someone that used to work at Zappos wrote, that talked about how to develop a culture, a strong culture in your business.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which then comes to like the whole idea of like hiring and firing. Like, what advice do you have if people are trying to hire that initial team? You said like, be careful. Like, how do you do that effectively?
Yeah. I have made so many mistakes with hiring. I can't.
Are you going to get petty and start naming names? I really hope so. Are we doing that?
we are going there. We're naming names. We're spilling all the tea right now, Marcus. So the first thing is, do not wait. Do not pull a Sarah and wait until you're desperate beyond belief that you just need a body with a degree and a seat. That doesn't work. And starting to really understand, like, at what point in time do you really need to be hiring someone, and having and creating a set protocol and process for hiring is really important. We have all of our team members complete various assessments that are pertaining to their specific job to make sure that they rank in the top percentile for both assessments. And then really ensuring that you have therapists that are congruent with your vision and the values in the culture. You don't want to just, again, hire someone just because you need a person in that spot. So having multiple interviews is important. If it's you and a partner, or you and other people within your clinic, having other people meeting them as well. And if you are the type of person that likes everyone, like myself, I think those people tend to do the worst when it comes to hiring people. And I don't think it's good for them to be involved, because they're going to like everyone and want to hire everyone. So that's why I no longer am involved with the process, because like, oh, this person,
We could make it work.
yeah, we're gonna make it work, they seem great. Yeah. So if you like everyone, or if you are always looking for the good in people, you need someone on your team to play devil's advocate and to be extremely objective, because not all therapists are built the same. And whenever you hire a therapist that isn't delivering excellent client care, or it can lead to so many unnecessary issues. And we obviously want to avoid any liabilities or anything that could be bad. And again, it's a negative reflection of the business, that in the hard work that everyone's done to create the organization. So being very careful with your hiring. Recruiters are your friends. If you haven't hired before, it might be worth looking into hiring a healthcare specific recruiter. They can help with developing the process and helping in the beginning stages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the names of those assessments that you use? You said you have 2 assessment measures?
Yeah. So for therapists, and I don't remember the exact name of them, the one is for reliability. So how reliable is this person? Because our team, Marcus, everyone works remotely. So we need extremely reliable people that if, a client is on their schedule, that they're going to be reliable and show up. So we measure for reliability. And then the second thing that we measure for is patient care. And so that basically assesses for how in tune a provider is with a client and what type of care are they going to deliver. It's almost like assessing for their virtual bedside manner.
Yeah.
So those are for therapists specifically. We use those assessments, and then for different rules, we use different assessments, and we just take the top tier people. And if there's any red flags, do not ignore the red flags. It's another mistake that I made, of ignoring a red flag, and then I hire them and I'm like, why did I do this?
How do you fire them when you failed the red flag? What tips do you have for people when they've hired someone who isn't doing work, isn't in line, I guess, isn't lining up with the values, or is somehow, I guess, not contributing to the culture that you want to build?
Yeah.
Firing.
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the state that you were in, because every state has different laws. I can share our process. So step number one is having a conversation with the person about whatever the concern or the opportunity is. Step number two is, if they're not making any changes, putting together a formal performance improvement plan, and giving them, it's like basically like SMART goals specifically. And then the supervisor signs it, the therapist signs it, and then typically the we revisit that in 30 days to see how many objectives were completed, were all the objectives completed, and if so, then they stay on, but if not, then they're terminated. If there's Pennsylvania's an at-will state, so if someone like looks at you the wrong way, you could technically fire them, which I've we obviously don't do that here. If there's a situation where someone is not doing the right thing or is in direct violation of our values, then, or if they do something that's really, really bad clinically, that could warrant an immediate termination. And then we typically do those on a Friday, a phone call or video visit, and ensuring that that person is locked out of everything that they formerly did have access to, because obviously we don't want someone with access to our EHR or any, private documents like that, and, making it very clear that they're terminated and then emailing a termination letter to their personal email. But it's a lot easier said than done, when it comes to firing people. It is my absolute least favorite thing in the world to do. And I still to this day lose sleep over it. And I wish I didn't. And I just really hate it. So it's like, well, if you could, make sure that you're hiring the right people in the first place, it reduces the amount of people you have to terminate. But it's warrant, if someone's not pulling their weight, or if they're not a culture fit, or if they're bad with clients, or if they're, not performing well, then it's a disservice to you and to them to keep them on in a role where they're not successful. And they can be successful somewhere else,
Yeah. Yeah. How, I guess, I guess maybe I want to be mindful of the time too. Maybe one last question about like how do you grow? I mean, maybe this is more personal. Like, where do you envision? How do you envision your group growing? And what advice do you have for people who want to have a group practice and have it be something that grows to be as big as they dream for it to be?
Yeah. So the first step is really considering what your vision is and reverse engineering what the vision is in a strategic plan, year over year, and then breaking it down into quarterly goals with the team. And so if you have, let's say like for this year, your vision or your goal is to, I don't know, like support like 50 clients per week, then you take that and you reverse engineer and to see like, okay, what all needs to happen in order to be able to support 50 clients a week. And then as the amount of clients come in, that is when you make other adjustments, such as like hiring therapists, and then eventually you would need to get super clinical supervisor if you don't have one already, and then eventually clinical director. So it's really reverse engineering based off of what your vision is. And everyone has a different, vision for what they want their clinic to look like. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess anything that I didn't ask that you think would be, I don't know, that you think would be helpful for like closing wisdom or like closing thoughts or nuggets or ideas that you would maybe want to be willing to share with us about your process or others interested in doing this work, doing solo practice, doing clinics, or even going beyond what we've talked about.
Yeah. So I would say that really anything is possible, within reason, of course. And you can only build as high up as your foundation is deep. And so making sure that whenever you are getting started, that you do have the right systems, the right tech, the right EHR, the right billing system, the right payment processing, the right marketing strategies and referral strategies. Because as you grow, the issues don't go away, they just get bigger. And so if you can ensure that your foundation is set, then growth is a lot easier. And when it comes to success, I mean, there's so many different creative ways and different things that that people can do. And so, Marcus, you've shared about having a foundation. Um, there's so many different things that someone can do to give back, and it's there's really no limit to what someone can do and what impact we can make. And I think especially in the mental health sector, and I have very strong opinions about this, I think it's really important for providers and people that are truly passionate about mental health to be the ones to own clinics and to grow clinics, because we have an ethical responsibility to do no harm. And the way that we, patient care is always a priority. And I've seen um, the clinics that I refer like my loved ones to are all provider owned, and you can leave it, leave it
Yeah.
like,
I love that. Well,
yeah.
thank you. I wrote a bunch of notes about things that I'm going to go and discuss with my wife, see if she can help me implement. But this is really great stuff. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I really appreciate you and the Belongly community, and um, Lindsay and Zoe and Doug for helping to coordinate all of this. It's such an awesome community and really excited to be a part of it. And if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. And again, like, there's really no limit to the amount of lives that we can touch and influence. And, I'm happy to help.
So maybe we can just do a couple of questions that we had from the community and get your answers on it. One that we've heard a bit about is imposter syndrome. So having some trepidation about starting or growing your practice and, feeling like an imposter in the field since so many people have gone before. Maybe Marcus, you can reflect on that first. Any thoughts on how to deal with it? Have you experienced it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I practice therapy from a very acceptance, and like I do DBT, so it's acceptance and change. And I guess one idea is like, what do we do to make the imposter syndrome go away? And my thought is like, just take imposter syndrome and do what you got to do, right? Like, figure out what your values are, what your goals are. But I think the more that we make not feeling that imposter syndrome a goal, I actually think it's going to make it more and more salient in our lives. So I'd say, like, yeah, that's the thought. The thought that I'm an imposter showed up, and the uncomfortable emotions of shame and anxiety and like that show up with that. Like, okay. And I guess my thought would be like, let's try to be guided by our values and our goals and not our emotions. So I don't know. I guess maybe that's an unpopular view, but I'd be like, yeah, that's okay. Like, take imposter syndrome with you and do whatever you've got to do. And eventually it'll go away. And if it doesn't, at least you did the stuff that mattered most to you, with an uncomfortable thought and emotion, like, hey, coming along for the ride.
That's great advice. Sarah, any thoughts?
Yeah, Marcus's answer was incredible. Yeah, just because you think something doesn't mean it's real. It's, if you went to school and you graduated with a master's or PhD and you're practicing, the facts are that if you truly were an imposter, you wouldn't have graduated, and that the university or the school wouldn't have given you that degree. And so if you do have the degree, and you're still having those thoughts, then it's definitely, I definitely agree with everything that Marcus said, that not every decision that we make is extremely comfortable. And anytime you go outside of your comfort zone, you're more than likely going to feel some level of anxiety or stress, or you could have imposter syndrome. And it can be part of it. I experienced some of it whenever I was first starting out. And then I just told myself, I'm like, you know what, Sarah, like, it is what it is. Like, you're gonna get through it. You're gonna continue to learn. And if I really was an imposter and really sucked at what I did, then, I would not have even been able to graduate.
So it sounds like what you're both saying is that if you're feeling imposter syndrome, you're probably doing it right.
Probably. That means you might be challenging yourself. And if we feel like imposters, I think that's also helpful because there might be people who are doing it better than us, right? Like I like as a professor, my students come in, they're like, I have an imposter syndrome, and I'll ask why, and they'll be like, and their reasons are super valid. I'm like, yeah, no, like that is a better student. I mean, I don't shame the kid, right? But I'm like, yeah, there are people who are definitely writing better papers than you. And then that's, I guess, goes back to what Sarah was saying, like finding coaches then. Like if we feel like imposters, that might actually be like our brains doing us a great favor of highlighting areas that are growth edges still for us, and then go get the training, like get the mentorship, get the supervision that you need so that you are in fact really capable and skilled in that area. And sometimes I think we have imposter syndrome about stuff that doesn't really matter. Right? Like I think a lot of the things, I'm so glad that you shared your answers of what matters most, Sarah, because I think a lot of times clinicians might be focusing on other stuff and they're like, oh, but my business cards aren't as awesome as Sarah's. And Sarah would be like, okay, but like who cares? Like I think that sometimes we might be feeling imposter syndrome about stuff that's not central and core to what we do. But if it is, then like don't ignore that either. Like figure out what is that trying to say and how can I get the skills that I need so that I feel like less of an imposter. And I think the combo of like figure out what it's trying to say to me and meet that need, and like at some point just let go of that feeling and focus, not let go, just like don't focus on, don't make that your agenda for the imposter syndrome to go away. Make your values and your goals that are based on your values your priority.
Yeah, that's great. So another question I have, we hear a lot of these buzzwords right now. We hear burnout, and sort of as an answer to burnout, we hear this idea of self-care. And I feel like these two words are existing everywhere at the moment. But at the same time, I think we're all experiencing this time of great isolation. And we hear this so much from therapists and solo practitioners that are, face to face seeing patients all day, but kind of taking on the weight of the world in that process. So how do you guys deal with, spending a lot of time one-on-one with folks that are struggling, but also taking care of yourself? Is that something you do individually? Is that something you reach out for support? How do you handle that?
I think about a quote, I think it's Brianna Weiss or West or something, but she said, true self-care is not bath salts and chocolate cake. It's making a choice to build a life that you don't need to escape from. So I'd say like, if we feel really burnt out, rather than like, oh, like, let me go do a manicure and like, let me go and I don't know, I think we need to restructure our lives so that it's reflective. I mean, like, again, back to what Sarah was saying, like figure out what your values are and make sure that you're living in a way that's consistent to that. And I think when we're doing that, we're much less likely to be burnt out. I think burnout is oftentimes a symptom of we're doing things that don't really matter to us, that aren't really in line with our values and our long-term goals for ourselves. And a bath salt might, like a massage might help, but I think really to solve burnout, it's like get back in touch with your core values and make sure that your behaviors and your daily schedule lines up with that. And then I think secondly, let's be relentlessly like focused on managing burnout. Like the treatment that I do in DBT, like our top priority when we come together as clinicians is life-threatening behaviors. Like if our clients have imminent risk of suicide or homicide, but a very next priority, even above like therapy interfering behaviors, above quality of life interfering behaviors, which quality of life interfering behaviors is everything come for. Like we're here for perfectionism, substance abuse, PTSD, panic attacks, like depression. But second thing that we focus on besides life threatening is our own burnout as clinicians, right? Because if we are not prioritizing our own burnout, then we won't be able to do any of the other work. So besides my client's life, I prioritize my wellness. So like literally just like 10 minutes before this call, I got an email, and it was one of those long emails from a mother, it was like from a patient, super long email. It burns me out to respond to emails like that. So I know that this mom wants a long response to the many questions that were posed in this email. I'm probably going to write something like, thanks so much for sharing this information. You bring up a lot of important points. We need to meet to discuss this as a team. because that doesn't burn me. I'm that's that basically I'd say, and then I'd say, when can we all get together and have a treatment team meeting with you and me and your child's individual therapist, and we can figure out where we're going, and if the treatment is what you want it to be, because then I'm less burnt out because I'm getting paid for my time, first off, to meet with them. I can't communicate super clearly in an email. I don't actually know what the issues are, but I can assess them more clearly in person. And so I know, and some people might be the opposite. Some people are like, oh my God, I'm so glad she wrote. I'd like to do this. Like figuring out what burns you out and like managing that and taking responsibility instead of getting mad at that patient and be like, oh my God, like, why is this patient doing this to me? Like, they're burning me out. It's like, well, we can structure our clinical work and our business in ways like we have agency. And so we can say, great, like, I'm going to, like, I appreciate what you shared and I want us to discuss those in person. That would be like I guess a me example.
Yeah, that's great, because I think if you can really identify what gives you energy and where you really excel, then that all builds on each other instead of sort of accepting the realities of things that drain you, or even accepting them as necessary. Sarah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, those were such great points. And when it comes to burnout, I think a lot of it is perception, and like what Marcus shared with how you have your life in different things established. And I think boundaries are also important in the clinical sense when you are meeting with clients. And having strong boundaries really helps with reducing burnout. And if there's different things that you can do for your providers to reduce the probability of burnout. One would be looking, at the caseload sizes and making sure that it's appropriate. Another thing that we do is we provide mental health days that our team can take if they just need to take like a day to themselves to do whatever they need to do to unwind and take care of themselves. But having, I think, the structure of doing things for yourself and taking care of your health and your mind on a consistent basis really helps with, reducing the onset of that.
Great. Well, on that note of taking some time for yourself, thank you guys so much for this. It was really incredible. It's very cool to watch two like masters go back and forth and kind of talk. So thanks from all of us, and thank you for the community. And like any last things you want to share?
Oh yeah. So if you enjoy this, to definitely connect with me on the Longley for sure. My name is Sara Makin, and if you would like to stay up to date with what's happening at Makin Wellness, you can follow us at Makin Wellness on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, TikTok, and wherever you like to hang out on social media.
Starbucks, yeah, maybe just at Starbucks. You'll see.
I'll be there with like my business cards, just like pinning things to the wall.
Definitely send us links to your books, and Marcus as well. I want to read your children's book.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Best of luck in this process.
Cool.